videos about doing some suspension upgrades to my 1993 Honda Civic. We're going to be switching the coilovers in this video today. Probably going to do a part one of installing the coilovers and doing the bump to compression ratio, as well as setting the ride height under load. Basically a paraphrasal of the Gears and Gasoline video that came out a little bit ago with Ben and his time attack Civic. I'm sure you've seen a ton of videos of people putting coilovers on a 92 to 95 Honda Civic, so I'm going to spare you guys the details and just get the old coilovers off the car, and I'll compare them to the new stuff that I have on the bench.
Darren has made that shit.
Here are the coilovers removed from the car. These are a set of Progress Suspension CS2 coilovers with Koni ground control top hats, as well as energy suspension isolators that I added. I purchased these used about 2 years ago. They've seen 1 season of track time and 2 seasons of autocross, maybe 3. There's nothing inherently wrong with these coilovers. I'm just switching them out to a different brand. The spring rates on these guys are 450 pounds per inch in the front, which is about 8K, and the rear are 550 pounds per inch, which is about 10K. They are rear biased, which is more of an autocross setup. I'm going to be flipping the spring rates. Most off-the-shelf coilovers are front biased, which I'm going to be going back to. I had these guys mounted on the lower shock mount, and I just kind of cranked the height. I'm not sure if that was the right way to do it, but that's how I rode them. These coilovers have done me really well. However, they are not dampening adjustable, and they only have 1 point of adjustment, which is just ride height. These things have served me well on track, at autocross. Definitely not super comfortable to ride on the street. I'm unsure of the valving of these shocks, but I think that the new coilovers may be a little bit better riding on the street just due to shock valving than these guys, even with a higher spring rate. Me replacing these coilovers has no effect on how I feel about them. Definitely great coilovers, well priced, well put together. Definitely a good intro coilover if you want to get into some autocross with your Civic. I would definitely highly recommend these, especially if you can find a set used. These guys have been around for a long time, and you can most definitely find a set secondhand. I got these ones used, but they were revalved right before I got them because the previous owner was sponsored by Progress Auto Group. Here are the coilovers that are going in as a replacement. These are some track spec S3 coilovers. These are the rears. They are 10K, and the fronts are 14Ks. I'm going back to a front bias setup, back from the rear bias setup I had previously, because I went down to a stock sway bar. I'm going to see if I can get the car to handle a little bit more neutrally. I was going to do upgraded bump stops and some coilover covers, but I wasn't able to get the correct ones, so those may be coming later. But let's get these guys thrown in the car, and I will talk about adjusting ride height. So I have the top bolts of the coilover bolted in, and I'm going to now measure the distance between the upper collar and the lower collar. Make sure it's the same on either side. They look like they were set the same from the factory, but I'm going to use the upper collar to adjust the distance. This is just going to get us a base ride height setting that I'm going to fine tune later. and then I'm going to set the car down. This is without the sway bar connected. And we're gonna get a measurement from the center of the wheel to the fender. I guess it's not gonna be super accurate because the fenders on this thing are pretty destroyed, but it's gonna give us a good enough baseline. I will fine tune this once we get the thing up on the scales and corner balance it in the second part of this video. Now that I've set both coilovers to 57 millimeters between the two collars, I'm going to fully install them and move on to the rear. Here we are at the rear of the vehicle. Coilover is installed, getting ready to drop the car down and check the ride heights. All right, I just got the car lowered down onto some, I guess, wheel cribs. I'm gonna take a measurement from the center bore of the wheel up to the fender. Definitely not gonna be the most accurate because there's a little bit of variation on the fenders on this thing, but just gonna get a rough ride height where I wanna be at. Ride height looks pretty good right there. It may need to come up a little bit, but I just wanna make sure that they're even. So I got the ride heights measured. They are the same side to side, give or take a little bit. I'm gonna correct that during a corner balance, but I'm going to raise the whole car. I think I'm gonna do about 15 mil in the back and 10 mil in the front, just so we're not having to worry about any rubbing issues. So I'm gonna put about 15, I'm gonna do 15 mil increase in the rear, 10 mil in the front, using the top collar to set the ride height. So I actually ran out of room for adjustment in the front, so I just raised them all the way up on the spring collar. I'm at 60 millimeters from the top to the bottom collar. Going to move on to the rear. I was only able to add about 3 millimeters to the front, so I'm going to add, let's say, 5 or 6 to the rear because it needs to be raised up a lot more than the front. All right, back here at the rear of the car, able to raise the coilovers 6 millimeters. They're sitting at 46 millimeters from collar to collar. I'm going to put the car back down and check the ride heights one more time. Okay, I've written down my collar to collar measurements and my bottom of the wheel to fender measurements, just because it's going to be easier. You can find the bottom of the wheel a lot easier than you can find the center of the wheel. But I got the car at a decent ride height for what I want. I'm going to now take the coilovers back out of the car and remove the springs so I can measure bump travel. Here are the front coilovers out of the vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and lock this guy down because we're not going to be touching the upper collar anymore. So we're going to move on to the lower collar. Here are the coilovers where the springs are moved. I'm going to install these in the vehicle like this, and at full droop, I'm going to make a measurement from the bottom of the wheel to the fender. So here is the wheel on the car, no spring installed in the coilover, and I'm going to take a measurement from the bottom of the wheel to the fender to determine my height at full droop. I'm also going to cycle the suspension and make sure that the bump stop comes in contact with the top hat before the wheel comes in contact with the body. Here is how the car sits with the spring removed and the suspension at full compression. So I'm going to take a measurement from the bottom of the wheel to the fender once again, and your ride height ideally should be halfway in between your bump measurement and your droop measurement. I would say about 10% of a variance is fine. This is also to check, make sure that nothing rubs. We're looking good. Gonna have to probably clearance some stuff once I put a 225 on the car. This is a 205 R888. It fits like a 225, but it's a 205. Please don't roast me for running these tires. They're all I have left. I have some Nankangs with stickers on them sitting on the shelf. So I'll get those on after autocross, but gonna make another measurement and make sure that my ride height is in the right place. So I just put the springs back on the coilover. I'm gonna throw them back in the car and we're gonna get a droop measurement, and I'm gonna compare that with the ride height. If shit's all weird, I'm probably just gonna leave it alone. But we're gonna see what's going on.
Damn right we're gonna see.
I have 544 millimeters in between the bottom of the wheel and the fender. Under compression I have 490 something, so that means I just measured wrong. So all the stuff that I said was right. Okay.
Look at him go, it's too easy, baby!
All right, so I figured out the error in my ways. I wrote 557 instead of 507. That was stupid. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna calculate how far our ride height is between droop and bump travel. So I'm gonna do some quick math and I'll let you know where it is. Okay, so our droop travel is 37 millimeters away from our ride height. So we have 37 millimeters of droop from ride height. And our bump travel is 54 millimeters away from ride height. So that means that the suspension travel is a little bit more biased towards the droop side, which means it's sitting a little bit lower. But I think that those 13 millimeters are not going to pose a huge effect upon how the car rides or what kind of suspension travel I'm getting. So I'm going to call that good for the front. I'm going to make some adjustments during the corner balancing, but I think that that's just fine for what I've got going on here. Okay, now that my brain is sufficiently fried, we're going to tighten everything down in the front. I'm going to reattach the sway bar. This is going to affect the droop travel just because it's not going to let the suspension sag down as far. In theory, but I'm gonna lock everything down and we're done with the front. The rear I'm gonna get to next, but let me get this all tightened down first. We're gonna move on to the rear. First thing I'm gonna start off with is getting a droop measurement, and then I'm gonna take the coilovers out and get a bump measurement of where our max travel is gonna be and make sure nothing hits. All right, so I'm getting ready to take the springs off the rear coilovers. I'm gonna lock the height collar down before I do anything. If you've noticed, the helper springs are a coil bind in the rear. I'm not sure that that's a good thing, but we're gonna find out. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more research. If there is an issue with that, I'm gonna post up a separate video. I think that there is a problem with it just because I don't have much more droop travel to go. Like, this is at full droop and the coil is compressed. So I'm gonna have to do some measurements, and then I'm gonna mess around with the spring heights and see what happens. Upon further inspection, I see that the top coil perch is all the way to the top, and I definitely don't think that that's a great idea. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to move the whole body down a little bit, and I'm going to keep the same distance between the two coil perches, and then I'm gonna take my droop and bump measurements without the spring in, and I will figure out where my ride height sits. Hopefully the ride height won't changing this, but these springs are pretty soft, so I'm going to have to take into account that. Here we're taking a measurement of the total ride height after I dropped the lower cup and the spring 30 millimeters, just to make sure that the spring was in its right place of travel. And we're looking at, I think it added a little bit to the ride height. It's about 51 centimeters or 510 millimeters. Just gonna confirm on the other side. I think that I need to go a little bit lower. Yeah, this one's a little high. So I need to drop 2 millimeters on this side. But I like this wheel gap a little bit better. I think that it sits a little bit higher. I think that that'll be decent enough. So I'm gonna raise the car back up, take 2 millimeters out of it, and I think we should be all right. So I'm satisfied with the ride height on this car, fully. Been messing with it for quite a while. It's getting pretty late. I'm gonna try this setup without measuring the bump and droop travel in the rear and just see how I like it. If there's an issue, I'll come back to it, but at this point, I'm kind of running out of time. All right, so the last thing that I'm gonna do, I almost forgot, is screw the dampening knobs in. They reverse thread? How the fuck do these go in? Figuring it out as we go. All right, they're a 17 mil nut, just like that. And the dampening settings that I'm gonna run, pull this up on my phone, are, this is from full stiff, 15 clicks in the front, and 18 clicks in the rear. This is recommended to me by the owner of S3 Suspension, so that's what I'm gonna start off as. Doesn't mean that it's gonna be final. Thank you guys for watching this video. Again, if I fucked anything up, please feel free to let me know. I'm definitely not a suspension expert, and I don't claim to be. So let me know how you guys feel. I really appreciate the feedback. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm probably super dirty, but I'll catch you next time.
Greasy gamer.
Jump